of graphite, but you would think it doesn't even have any weight to it. And he's paying for it. He's definitely going to pay by the pound. That's unbelievable. Okay, so we are recording on so we can get started. So again, we are on the we got up to Yudam and Aleph already, but I want to go back to the 2 dots on Testament base because we're learning about the halachas of Arla and how much is considered a year. Because we learned that the Rosh Hashanah for Netiyos, if you plant a sapling and Rosh Hashanah, Rosh Chodesh Tishrei comes along, already the 2nd year for Arla. I mean, full 3 years of Arla, you're going to get away with like 30 days of Arla. So we'll start at the bottom of Daf Testament base, 4 lines from the bottom. Tanu Rabbanim. Echad hanoiteya, whether you're planting a sapling, echad hamavrich, whether you're taking the branch of a tree, folding it down into the ground and then up again, so that little elbow in the ground will take root and you'll have an independent tree. V'echad hamaktiv, if you're bending over the branch of one tree and you're inserting it into a hole that you carved into another tree, which will bond them together. Erev Shvius Shloshim Yom Lefnei Rosh Hashanah. If you did this before a Shemitah year, before Rosh Hashanah, so you did it at the end of El. Now this is a bit confusing because we're talking about 2 separate halachas. We're talking about will that 30 days count towards your first year of Arla? That's one halacha, and the 30 days do count towards the first year of Arla. And then there's the other question. We know there's a concept to plant days before the Shemitah year. If you planted this more than 30 days before the Shemitah year, it's not considered like you violated Shemitah and you could leave this plant growing. You don't have to uproot it. So this is combining 2 separate halachas. It can get confusing, but in fact, there's 2 separate things going on over here. So the halacha is also loishana. It's also loishana for the purposes of Arla, that these 30 days count as year 1. And since you planted it before the Toisvis of Shemitah, you planted it before the Elul of the month before the Rosh Hashanah of Shemitah, you're allowed to let it remain. You haven't violated Shemitah. But if you planted it sometime in El, so you're within 30 days of Rosh Hashanah, then loy also loy shana. Then it doesn't count for you as a year. The osir l'kaimon b'shvius. So there's 2 problems here. A, it doesn't count as your year 1 as Arla. And B is you violated the Shemitah. Let's see the Rashi here at the bottom. You have to wait the full next year in order for you to be considered. That's if it's not Erev Shemitah. And any other year, this same rule would apply. If you planted something within 30 days of Rosh Hashanah, you don't get to count that year as number 1. Now, if in Erev in the halacha that we're referring to, if this is the year right before Shemitah, Osher Lakaima, then you're not even allowed to let this plant remain because Mishum Toisvis Shvius Shemaisifin Michal Al Kodesh, because you ended up planting it, but Isser, you planted it in the 30 days that was the period of Toisvis Shvius. Simple. Zok the Heilige Gemara Viter, or the Bryce Viter, who perished Natiyazu. Now, if you actually planted this, beheter, so you planted it more than 30 days before Rosh Hashanah, the morning of Vigdar, you planted it more than 30 days before Rosh Hashanah, so then let's do the counting. The 30 days before Rosh Hashanah was year 1, Shemitah will be year 2, the year after Shemitah will be year 3. So you might think that Rosh Hashanah, following year, now you're of Arla. Zok the Gemara, I don't think so. Tesvav b'Shvat. You'd have to wait till Tesvav b'Shvat of that year. Why? Because by the time the 3rd year comes along, this is no longer an Atiyah. Now it's an Elon. And we know that the Rosh Hashanah le'Elon is not Rosh Chodesh Tishrei. Rosh Hashanah le'Elon is Tu b'Shvat. So therefore, Imla Arla, if we're talking about leaving year number 3, getting into year number 4, it will remain Arla until number 4. Then we revise transition from year number 4 to year number 5. Again, it's still subject to the rules of Revai up until Tu B'Shvat of the year number 5. Let's see Rashi. Even though we already said also 30 days before Rosh Hashanah when you planted it, count as year one. Nevertheless, in Chantuba Peiros La'achar Rosh Hashanah, Shoshana Revius, Miyad, Adai Nasur and Henelamish Mishamor. If right after Rosh Hashanah of the fourth year, these pairs blossom, they're still considered within the 3 years of Arla. Shafalpi, Tishrei is Rosh Hashanah L'Natiyah. Tishrei is Rosh Hashanah L'Natiyah, and these pairs blossomed after Tishrei. So Rashi, Tu B'Shvat Rosh Hashanah L'Ilam. This is no longer an Atiyah. This is now an Ilam, and therefore it's subject to the Rosh Hashanah of Tu B'Shvat. The Zuk Farnat, and this tree, over the 3 years of its existence, it became a tree. L'fichach, Ein Shnasa Mischadeshes Lotzes Midei Arla at Tu B'Shvat. The year changeover for a tree is Tu B'Shvat. Al Mishamu L'Halon. But after Tu B'Shvat, pairs blossom, Din Revai, the fourth year. They're called Beter Revai, Lechel Yerushalayim, Ubetu, L'Shana Haba, and the following year, Tu B'Shvat, on year number 5, Yotzu Midei Revai, pairs Hachanutin Ba Mikan Veilach. Now they're regular, free, and clear pairs. Lakach Ha'ilu Lalamid. So this is an extremely important line in Rashi that's the subject of a massive machlokes Rishonim. So let's look at this last couple of lines. It seems so innocuous, but it's a huge bombshell. Lekach ha'ilu la lamid shalafnei Rosh Hashanah. Here, these 30 days of before Rosh Hashanah, the 30 days that he planted this sapling before Rosh Hashanah, shemimar hatera mitu v'shvat Rosh Hashanah. It's mimar the heter shvat to Lekach ha'ilu la lamid shalafnei Shemamar Hatera Mitu B'Shvat Rosh Hashanah. It's Mamar the Het from Tu B'Shvat Rosh Hashanah, which means he's saving. If it wasn't for these 30 days, he would have had to wait for the next Rosh Hashanah. But now that he planted it 30 days before, this year counts, and therefore it's already Mutar Tu B'Shvat. So let's think about this a second. Why does Rashi say that the fact that I chapped around these 30 days, it saves me from Tu B'Shvat to Rosh Hashanah? Why doesn't Rashi say it saves me from Tu B'Shvat to the next Tu B'Shvat? Because it's pushing all these 30 days is advised me the extra year at the beginning. But at the end, if the Rosh Hashanah is Tu B'Shvat, so what's the difference if I use these 30 days to act as year number 1, or if I didn't use these 30 days to act as year number 1? By year number 3, it's a tree already. So by year number 3, it should always be totally in Tu B'Shvat. But Rashi doesn't say that. Rashi says that since I'm relying on these 30 days, I save from Tu B'Shvat to Rosh Hashanah. Because if I didn't have these 30 days, I would have had to wait till the next Rosh Hashanah. Why doesn't Rashi say that I would have to wait till the next Tu B'Shvat? Because at the end, it's already Tu B'Shvat that rules. So this is the subject of a big machlokes Rishonim. Rashi says the only time you have to wait till Tu B'Shvat is if you got to wait cheap at the beginning and you only have 30 days. But if you in fact had 3 full years, Rashi holds you wouldn't have to wait till Tu B'Shvat, which is very interesting. It's a tree already. Why not? The Balamor, the Rishonim, they say, what's the difference? What the beginning? If by the time the tree, the Rosh Hashanah is Tu B'Shvat, so you got to wait till Tu B'Shvat. So that is the machlokes Rishonim. So Rashi has a shtickle svara is that really Rosh Hashanah is good enough. But since there's still some sap left in the tree from Arla, so you got to wait till it all gets depleted. But so then what's the difference if I started early? If I didn't start early, there's sap. So Rashi is a little bit of a shver shita, but Rashi seems to say that if it was applied on the abridged year at the beginning, you wouldn't have to wait till Tu B'Shvat, you'd be able to get away with Rosh Hashanah.
The practice in Allah we pass like Rashi, like this coming to play in a scroll somewhere?
So this is a very big shaila. First of all, there's a big shaila b'chlal if Revai is nagei in chutzlarts. So machlokes, we fear I think that it's nagei in chutzlarts only. We only fear it's nagei in chutzlarts lagabi grapes, not lagabi other pears. Arla, it's Allah Moshe. I think Arla does apply in chutzlarts. However, the poskim do say that in chutzlarts we wouldn't be makbid on waiting until Tu B'Shvat. You could wait until Rosh Hashanah, but in the next stroll, you'd have to wait until Tu B'Shvat. So this actually is nagei halacha l'maaseh.
Rashi is a problem.
Rashi is a kula. Because Rashi says if you have 3 full years, you don't have to wait until Tu B'Shvat. To the following Tu B'Shvat, you only have to wait till the third. If you planted on Rosh Hashanah, then you count 3 years, and then Rosh Hashanah is no longer by. Now, if you planted on Rosh Hashanah, you have 3 full years, you still have to wait till the 4th year of Tu B'Shvat. Yeah. So Tishrei, Cheshvan, Kislev, Tei B'Shvat, it's an extra 5 months.
Rashi is a fool, so do we pass like Rashi in Eretz Yisrael, or do they go according to most of the?
I think it's shoulder and machmer that you have to put the Tu B'Shvat.
Oh, okay, not like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And in Chutz La'aretz, I believe that's the way elephants go past. And I believe it doesn't mean I looked up Shulchan Aruch and I heard Sugya. It means that on my way walking over here, I was listening to Rabbi Elephant, and that's what he said.
Like Rashi, even if you-
I hear. Okay, so let's see the Gemara Vayit. So now the Gemara wants to know, where do you get this from? So Rashi, Sheshnois Orla Urevai Nimshochen Lesser Perish Hachanutim Koidim La'achar Shekolu Shnei Orla. Even though all the 3 years of Orla have been depleted, there's still a chiv to wait until Tu B'Shvat. Where does that come from? Amar Rab Kiya bar Abba Amar Rabbi Yochanan Umatu Ba Mishmei Rabbi Yanai. There are some people who are Matu Ba Mishmei Rabbi Yanai, which is an interesting nusach, which Rashi explains. Yesh matin umachriin b'shmuazu la'imra Mishmei Rabbi Yanai. There are those who bend and divert the source of this halacha to Rabbi Yanai. It says Amar Kra uv'shana hashaviyus uv'shana hachamishus. So let's look back at the psukim. When we started the sugya, we pointed that out. So it says in the pasuk, this is the pasuk that discusses Arla. The pasuk could have then continued and said, Ba Shana Haravius, it's revived. But there's a vav that's mechabered, Uva Shana Haravius, which indicates the Arla also applies, extends into the Shana Haravius. This pasuk talks about revive. And then when it talks about the pairs being free and clear, it does not say Ba Shana HaChamishis, there's Uva Shana HaChamishis, which indicates that the halachas of Ravai extend a little bit into the 5th year as well. So therefore, it's beautiful. It says Uva Shana HaRavius, Uva Shana HaChamishis, Ha'amim Sheravius, sometimes we're already in the 4th year, we're past Rosh Hashanah, V'adayin Asur Mishum Arla, and we're still Asur because of Arla, because it extends until Tu B'Shvat. Sometimes we'll already be in the, and your thought will be that why isn't this pairs free and clear? But because it's going to be usher until it's going to be usher until Tu B'Shvat. Now there's a very big distinction between Arla and Rai. Ravai, it's going to until the Tu B'Shvat of the 5th year, it follows the rules of Ravai. You can eat it, but you have to eat it in Yerushalayim. But by extending Arla till Tu B'Shvat of the 4th year, those pairs are usher and ganzen. You can't use them at all forever. You wait and then you can use those pairs of Arla. Pairs of Arla are usher forever. Zok Gemara, Lema the Loikrab Meir. We're saying that 30 days is what you need to consider it that the pairs were there for a year. Therefore, if you planted this 30 days before Rosh Hashanah, we'll count that as year number 1. Lema the Loikrab Meir, this is not consistent with Reb Meir, who says even 1 day alone would be enough to give it as a year. The Reb Meir, Ha'amar Yom Echad B'Shana, Chashav B'Shana. Reb Meir said that even 1 day in a year is considered a full year. And we're going to divert a little bit to a different sugya that's going to discuss Yom Echad B'Shana, Chashav B'Shana. The Tanya we learn, Par Ha'amar B'Torah. When it says par, regarding bringing a carbon with a par, Stam ben Esrim va'arba chodesh v'yom echad. It means 3 years, and the way something is considered 3 years is if it's on this world 24 months and 1 day, that 1 day, it's in its 3rd year. So it's considered Divi Rab Meir, that is Rabbi Lazar Omer ben Esrim va'arba chodesh v'lamidjan. You need 30 days in the 3rd year to make it considered 3 years. Shahai Rab Meir Omer. Rab Meir used to say, "Kol egel b'Torah." Whenever it says, and let's look at Rashi where it says egel. It's a 3rd wide line in Rashi. Egel ben Shana dechsiv egel v'keves b'nei Shana. So whenever it says that, it means stam ben Shana. It means it's 1 year old. When it says ben Bakar, it says ben Bakar, and Rashi says, where does it say ben Bakar? Shal shemini limaluyim. On the 8th day of the Maluyim, the Torah dictates shenemar. Kachel ben Bakar lechatois, that's considered ben Shtaim. That's 2 years. And Rashi says ben Shtaim. Shenema ben Bakar va'ayla oil tamimim v'chitanya la b'tarash kahanim hishva ben Bakar va'ayla oil tamimim af b'shon. So it has to be in its 2nd year. And then par, when it says par in the Torah, And Rashi says, "Afilu kasakar loy nikra par b'pachash migimol shana." It has to be in its third year to be considered a par. Par ben shalish. So what is ben shalish? According to Reb Meir, it's 24 months and 1 day. According to Reb Elazar, it's 24 months and 30 days. So we are here that you need to plant this sapling at least 30 days before Rosh Hashanah for it to be considered having grown 1 year by the time Rosh Hashanah. That would not be consistent with Reb Meir, because according to Reb Meir, you should be able to plant it erev Rosh Hashanah. But it's consistent with Reb Elazar. That's the Gemara's chap. Now, before we go weiter, there's a whole Yom Echad B'Shana Chas V'Shana. Again, to Bar Mitzvah. Now, the halacha is, if you hold that the first day of his birthday, the day of a child's birthday, he becomes Bar Mitzvah, the Aruch HaNer happens to hold that, what if someone born at 3 o'clock in the afternoon? Bar Mitzvah is going to get up first thing in the morning, go to shul, and at 7 o'clock in the morning, he's going to put on tefillin. But the Aruch HaNer learns, you don't say Yom Echad B'Shana Chas V'Shana until you reach the point in that day where he was actually born. So according to Aruch HaNer, though you can do the beautiful ceremony the day of Bar Mitzvah, but he holds noon, you should go home and to put on your tefillin again. Be the kind of mitzvah as a chiv, as a goda. That's what Aruch HaNer holds. There are other Rishonim who argue and say avada, as soon as the day starts, you're already a goda.
So that means that a friend from there,
I'm not sure if that's how it works. Could be progressive. There's no din of Yom Echad B'Shana. Could be the halacha says beferish 8th day in the morning, right?
What do you mean by the Aruch HaNer and other Rishonim argue? Aruch HaNer was in the 1700s.
He's a very early achron, right?
Aruch HaNer is a very late achron. He was
So-
Reb Shalom.
So there's bringing down. He's the way he Rishonim. Could be the way he's understanding Rishonim. It would require that. So there's actually a tumult about it. Most people don't do that. I never heard of anybody putting on this film again in the afternoon. But there is such a shita to do that.
It would be very negeh Shabbos afternoon, right, to have an aliyah. Right, if he was born in the afternoon, and then he has
I hear. Yeah.
story.
So that's the so it's the shaila of Yom Echad B'Shana Chas V'Shana. What does it mean Yom Echad? Does it have to be that time, or could it just be the first thing in the morning? Anyway,
An aliyah is not a derisa. Having aliyah is
Oh, let's say if he wants to lane to it, that's what I meant. The bar mitzvah wants to lane. He can't lane if he's not.
Okay, that's why some places only give bar mitzvah bachar maftir, right? Because he may not have beisaros, so they only give him what's midrabanan.
Okay, wow. No.
To be bar mitzvah, you need two things: you need the time and you need beisaros.
You need two. You're right. That's the two things.
if it wasn't YouTube, I would have a very fun. So, now, I could probably say on YouTube too. I know I have someone who's related to me, who was a bar mitzvah bacher, and his father and his father's friends were all much older and they're Holocaust survivors. I know such a person. Let's not guess who that person might be. And the week before his bar mitzvah, an elder goes over to somebody, to this boy's father, and says, "Schick dan sie ran in the mikveh. Ich will sehen, so sagen, mach sicher, the boy can." This boy never went to the mikveh. After that, Zog the Gemara weiter. I feel the tamer Reb Meir. Maybe you could even say that it is Reb Meir, and Reb Meir would agree that although by the Behema 1 day is enough, before Rosh Hashanah, Reb Meir would agree it needs to be 30 days before. So why is that? When did Reb Meir say Yom Echad B'Shana Chas V'Shana? That's at the end of the first year. At the end of the first year, to count as your first year, if 30 days before Rosh Hashanah, that'll be considered a year. When you're talking about the beginning of the third year, which we're talking about for the animal, there lo yomar. There maybe if it's the end of the first year, then we'll say that's enough to be considered part of that year before. But when you're actually at the year now, who said that 1 day will be enough? Maybe there it wouldn't be enough. So when does the Mary say it's exactly the opposite of what I said. I said, don't forget, I apologize. When does the Mary say that's beside? Meaning, if I'm already 1 day into the third year, if the power is already 1 day into the third year, we'll say that he's called 3. But when we're talking about the beginning year, the first year, who said that the 30 days, that the 1 day would be enough? Maybe Reb Meir would hold that you also need 30 days. That's what the Gemara wanted to suggest. Maybe Reb Meir only said that is to enter the animal into the third year. But to say that the first year counts because of 1 day, there maybe Reb Meir is moida that you require 30 days. Amar Rava. So Rava said, "Is pung fakir." The Kalvachomer is pung fakir. If you're going to say that Yom Echad b'Shana Chas v'Shana to let the animal be considered 3 years old, surely you should say that the Yom Echad b'Shana Chas v'Shana to allow the 1 day Rosh Hashanah to be considered year number. Why is that? Because Uman Nida. And Rashi is very careful to say this is not Negeya la'alacha to Asaral. We shouldn't make any mistakes. This is referring to the Nida Daraisa. Nowadays, a woman who sees Tipas Dam Kachardol treats herself like a Zavagadol. She has to count Shivanakiyim. We wait 5 days, and then there's Shivanakiyim, and then Shikatoivel. This is not relevant to us. But before the Gezeres were made way back in the Gemara's times, Anida, who saw Dam, had to wait 7 days. She saw Dam all 7 days. As long as the Dam stops at the end of the 7th day, at night she can toivel, and she's Torah after that. Again, that's not relevant because Rashi goes through a lot of pains to reiterate. This is not relevant to us.
The window of opportunity for a man and a woman to have a child in those days was much bigger.
Correct. So Uman Nida, well, not really, because technically it's only when a woman ovulates. So that doesn't change.
When
Right.
That's right.
That's right. So Uman Nida, Madacha Nida, she'ein tchilas hayoyim oila la b'soifa. The woman who's a Nida has to count 7 days. The 7th day, she has to wait till the end of the 7th day after night, and then she can touch. So she doesn't get credit for the last day having only part of the day. Nevertheless, day 1 is always the day that she saw, right? We don't say day 1 is the day after she saw. Day 1 is the day that she saw. If she saw late in the afternoon, a couple of hours is all that's going to be counted for day 1. So you see that it's much easier to count a Mitzvah Yom on day 1 than it is to count a Mitzvah Yom at the end. So therefore, if a mayor holds, you count a Mitzvah Yom at the end, and an animal that's 1 day into his third year is considered 3 years old, Kol Shekain, Reb Meir should say that the 1 day should count at the beginning. So once again, a Reb Meir will be inconsistent with our Brisa, because our Brisa said 3 days before, and according to Reb Meir, 1 day before. So look at Reb Uman Nida. The end of her counting, she needs to count all the way until the end of the day. Nevertheless, the very first day, she doesn't have to have a full day, because if she saw Nida at the end of the first day, that still counts as day 1. Shana, a year, where a mayor holds when it comes to years, the fact that the animal is 24 months and 1 day already as a 3-year-old animal, and surely if you planted something 1 day before Rosh Hashanah, it should count as that full year. So Zok Gemara, so you're arguing that Reb Meir cannot be consistent with the Brisa that we quoted, that you have to plant something 30 days before Rosh Hashanah in order for it to be considered 1 year by the time Rosh Hashanah arrives. So Zok Gemara, let's look, what are your other options? So you want to argue that our mission is going to come to Rabbi Lazar, says that you need 30 days into the third year? That wouldn't work very well either, because according to Rabbi Lazar, you need 30 plus 30. Why would you need 30 plus 30? Let's look at Rashi on the 4th line on the top. Rashi is telling us that it takes 30 days after you plant something in the ground for its roots to penetrate and it to be considered planted. And it's fully planted, then ushloishim yoim l'chashiv Hashanah. So it's not just enough that you just threw it in the ground and it's there for 30 days before Rosh Hashanah, and that will be considered like it's a full year. It had to have been already rooted in 30 days before Rosh Hashanah. The time that it's taking root, That's not counted. That's not counted at all. The chaman the monach bevesedam. Just because you have wood in the ground, it's like it's on your dining room table until it actually takes root. So according to Belazar, 30 days before will not help. You have to apply that it's 60 days before. It's not we learned. Ain noited, vein mavrichin, vein markivin. You're not allowed to do these three activities that we consider planting. Erev Shvius, Pachos Milamed Yoim Lefnei Rosh Hashanah. Not allowed to do any of these activities with of Rosh Hashanah. The Hivrich, the Hirkid, if you did one of these three things illegally, Yakar, you must uproot these pairs, this plant. Rash's Yakar, Lefisha Kolta B'Shvius, because at the end of the day, took root on Shemitah. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, Kol Arkava She'ena Keletes Begimel Yomim Shuv Eina Keletes. Rabbi Yehuda holds that 3 days is the maximum time that it takes to be koilet. So therefore, you don't have to have it 30 days before. 3 days there'll be a klita. And of course, there's not a machloikis in mitzias of how long it takes something to take root. The machloikis is what level of rooting is enough that we consider it planted. Rabbi Yosy, Rabbi Shimon, it's 2 weeks. But Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabba bar Ravua, and Rav Nachman commented in the name of Rabba bar Ravua on this machlokes. The divrei ha'omer lamed, according to the Shita who holds that you need to have planted it 30 days before Shemitah, tzarech lamed u'shloshim. He needs 30 plus 30. And Rashi says, why do you need 30 plus 30? Shloshim l'klita, 30 days for it to take root, and then v'lamed l'toisfus. And you're not allowed to have something planted on the 30 days before Rosh Hashanah. So therefore, you would have to have it planted 60 days before Rosh Hashanah, so that by the time 30 days before Rosh Hashanah arrives, it's already fully rooted. The divrei ha'omer, if you hold it, it only takes 3 days to take root. Once again, it has to be fully rooted before 30 days before Shvius. And the divrei ha'omer beisha basois tzarech shteish tabasos shloshim yom. The inami, even if you want to say that our brayso that says you only needed 30 days, it's gimel l'shloshim ba. You need 33 days, and our brayso says 30 days is enough. So if our brayso says 30 days is enough, how does it stem with this? So therefore, we're going to have that says 30 days is taka going according to Reb Meir. The chika amar lamed leklita. The reason why you need 30 days, according to Reb Meir, even though Reb Meir holds Yom Echad b'Shana Chasav Shana, the 30 days is for it to take root, and then 1 day before Rosh Hashanah, Yom Echad b'Shana Chasav Shana. Correct. The Gemara Ihachi lamed aleph boy. Then you need 31 days. You need 30 days for it to take root, and then once it's taken root, you need 1 full day before Rosh Hashanah. And that's up to Gemara, because Ahmed Oila Lukan Lukan. That the same day that could also be the day that counts for the Yom Echad b'Shana Chasav Shana Lagabi the din of Arla. So at the end of the day, our brayso is following Reb Meir. Am Rabbi Yochanan, u'shneim mikra echad dorsh. We have a machlokes if Yom Echad b'Shana Chasav Shana or 30 days b'Shana is Chasav Shana. They both get their information from the same pasuk. Merely they have a different way to interpret what the pasuk is saying. It's Parashat of Noach. After the Mabul, I think. The he ba'achas b'sheish me'ay shana. I'm going to read the pasuk in the Torah. The ba'achas b'sheish me'ay shana. It was year 601. 601 to the life of Noach. Berishon, on the first day, b'echad l'chodesh, which would be Rosh Chodesh Tishrei or Rosh Chodesh Nishan. That's a little bit of a shaila. Charbu hamayim el haaretz. The earth started to dry up. A Yosy Noach has michsei ateva, the cover of the teva. V'yar v'hinei charbu paneha. So let's have a look at Rashi, who explains what this pasuk is talking about. It's a very fascinating Rashi. V'hi ba'achas l'sheish me'ishan. L'soif ashtei aser chodesh shehischol mabel levi. This day occurred 11 months after the rain started. The divrei ha'omer b'tishrei nivra olam. If you hold that the world was created in Tishrei, and therefore umabel yored b'yudzayin v'macheshvan, which would tell us, if you analyze the psukim, that the mabul started on the 17th day of Cheshvan, Kitla Kamon, like we learned, which is actually coming up. We're already closing in on the 17th day of Cheshvan. And it's starting. So have a high Berishon be'echad l'chodesh b'Tishrei. This pasuk of Berishon be'echad l'chodesh would be speaking about Tishrei. If the world was created in Tishrei, this pasuk cannot be referring. Why? Sharei Mabel. We know the Mabel rained for 40 days. And then there's 150 days, even after the rain, that the water was goiber from itself. And it's mashchu at Sivan. Then Sivan, they would have extended to Sivan. Now let's figure this out. 40 plus 150 is 90. So that what that is really is it's 6 months and 10 days. So if you count from Yud Zayin, Cheshvan, so you have Yud Zayin Kislev, Yud Zayin Kislev, Yud Zayin Teves, Yud Zayin Shvat, Yud Zayin Adar, Yud Zayin Nisan, and Yud Zayin Iyar, plus another 10 days, which basically you're holding at Sivan. The Achakach, from the beginning of Sivan, the water was draining slowly. At Chodesh Asiri, so Sivan and Tammuz, the water drained until Av. Av was the 10th month, counting from when the rain started. And in Av, when you started seeing the mountaintops, the water continued to drain from Chodesh Av until Echad B'Tishrei. And that's why the day that we're talking about is the day of Echad B'Tishrei, when the water drained out and the earth was now uncovered. And then Rashi says, if you hold the ear, you're a mabul, so it just pushes the whole thing off by 6 months. But whatever it is, we're talking about Rosh Chodesh Tishrei of the 601st year. But the Gemara Dash Reb Meir learned as follows. We're talking about the very first day of Tishrei. It's only one day in this year, and it says the fact that there it could have said the why did the pasuk stick in Shana? Shemamina Yom Echad b'Shana Chas b'Shana. The pasuk, by sticking in that word Shana, is trying to make a statement and tell us that even one day is considered Shana. The Rebbe Lozer, who learns from this same, that's 30 days. Zok Rebbe Lozer, first I have to chop down your raya. You don't have a raya from here that Yom Echad b'Shana Chas b'Shana, because Iksiv b'Sheish Meis ba'achas Shana. If the word Shana came right after the word Achas, yes, I would say that indicates that one day is considered a Shana. But ba'achas b'Sheish Meis Shana, which means the word Shana is connected to the Sheish Meis. Sheish Meis Kai. The word Shana Sheish Meis Kai. The Shana is referring to the 600 years before, not the one day in year 601. Umay Achas, and the Achas just means Aschalta the Achas Comer. We're starting now a new year, but of course it's not considered a year yet with merely one day. So that's how Rebbe Lozer neutralizes Reb Meir's raya. But where does he have a proof positive that 30 days is considered enough to be a year? Rebbe Lozer, my time. It says later on, Berishain midakati yoim echad hu the ayal b'chodesh. Since it's only one day into the month, and it's calling the one day in the month chodesh. Shemamina yom echad b'chodesh chashav chodesh. You see that when you're talking about months, once you're one day in the month, it's already considered that month. Zokt Rebbe Lozer. So now we can extrapolate. If one day of a month is the whole month, then lamed yom b'shana chasuvin shana. Then 30 days will be enough to create a year in relative to a year. How do you get that? The chodesh l'menuya b'shana l'menuyeha. When you count, what you count to get a month? You count day units. So 1 unit from the units that you count to combine to make a month will be considered a month. 1 day for a month. What units do you count to make a year? You count months. And therefore, it's 1 full month that you need to create a full year. Zok the Gemara Baitim. Which is really a new sugya, but we have a little bit of time, so we'll just learn a couple of extra lines. Tanya Devei Rabbi Elazar, the Tishrei Nivra Ha'ila. The world was created in Tishrei. The Tishru Noldu Avos. In Tishrei, the Avos were born. The Tishrei Mesu Avos. In Tishrei, the Avos passed away. The Pesach Noilad Yitzchak was born on Pesach. Rosh Hashanah Nifkeda Sarah Rachel V'Chana. Sarah Rachel and Chana were both Zoichet to their Yeshua, that they were Zoichet to have children. The gift was granted. They didn't become pregnant on Rosh Hashanah, but the gift was granted on Rosh Hashanah. Yotze Yosef Mebeis Asurin, and also on Rosh Hashanah, Rosh Hashanah Yotze Yosef Mebeis Asurin. On Rosh Hashanah Yosef got out of jail. Rosh Hashanah Batla Avoida Me'aveseinu b'Mitzrayim. On Rosh Hashanah we stopped having to work, even though we were still in Mitzrayim. We didn't have to work anymore. In Nisan, we got out of Mitzrayim, and the Tishrei Asidin Ligoyel. When Mashiach comes, our future Golus is going to end in Tishrei. B'Shuaimer, ben Nisan Nivra Ha'olam. In Nisan, the world was created. Ben Nisan, all the Avos. In Nisan, the Avos were born. Ben Nisan, Mesu Avos. In Nisan, the Avos died. Yitzchak, Rosh Hashanah, Sarah, Rachel, V'Chana. Rosh Hashanah Yotze Yosef Mebeis Asurin, and Rosh Hashanah Batla Avoida Me'aveseinu b'Mitzrayim, and Ben Nisan Nigalu, Ben Nisan Asidin Ligoyel. And let's stop here. We'll be on tomorrow, but the whole sugi tomorrow is going to be analyzing this brisa. We're going to redo the brisa tomorrow, but it's going to analyze how we know about all these things that occurred on these times that the brisa says. Shkoyach. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.